340 Paddler, blah, blah.
Welcome back to 340 Paddler, and we're back to our stories of the 340. Today I have two tales that revolve around, well, loosely sandbars. And as we all know, sandbars are not necessarily sandbars on the 340. Some are muddy, some are real, some are in the way, but we'll get into that. We have two stories today from Chris Saber and Billy Bellinger. So starting with Chris Saber. So 2022, and I'm reading from the story now. Middle of the second night, I catch eye of this huge, brown, hazy blob coming at me from downriver at very fast speed. May have been a hallucination. I look over at Matt Feltrip, who does have lots of hallucinations, who is kayaking with me, and I say to him, "What the is that?" He says, "What are you talking about?" I don't see anything. At this point, I need to stop and say that the same thing happened to me when I was paddling with Gary Fisher one year, and he did, in fact, apparently get assaulted by a beaver. That's a whole different story. Anyway, back to our story. To which I reply, "That brown thing headed right for us." "I don't see a brown thing. It's right in front of us. What the heck is the..." And then stopping dead in my tracks, "Oh, it's a sandbar." As I look over at Matt, only to see him slam to a halt. "Well, Chris, I think you're right. Well, how do we get around this? I think we need to go river left." I say, "I hear rushing water to the left. I'm not going that way." We jovially argue for at least 10 minutes until I insist that I was not going that way. He was more than welcome. I recommended that we go back upriver for a small bit and turn around to see the turn of the river, and the sandbar would be on the inside so we can go the opposite direction. By the way, makes a lot of sense. Until you realize they're out there at night. It's at least night 1, probably night 2, and they're tired. Going upriver is not going to be the easiest thing in the world. Continuing. We both head back upriver, but when he says to me, go back upriver when he says to me, "Well, I think we cleared that sandbar. We're making time now." I said, "No, we still have to turn back downriver." It took a few moments to convince him we needed to turn around back downriver. At that point, we turned and looked at the bend to see that we needed to go river right. Crisis averted. Lived through that only to take on Burger Bend the next night. By the way, you hear that and you go, "That's funny. How do you end up on the wrong side of a sandbar? You don't see a sandbar, but look at the picture." It's easy enough at night, especially when you're sitting low, to misread that. It's just a line on the horizon. If you don't know that you're looking for it, and if you get behind it somehow, you could end up, lost in Chesterfield, which has happened to multiple people. Lost behind wing dikes, lost all over the place, sandbars and everything else. Definitely something that can happen, but I have a different story of a sandbar, and I want to share this one because it looks at things a little differently. This from Billy Bellinger, 2022. Quote, "I had this idea of getting out of the boat once an hour to stretch my legs and back." By the way, makes a lot of sense. Don't do it once an hour. You're going to be in trouble eventually, but hey, what the heck? Let's give it a shot. Got tired of sitting in the seat, so about 2 hours out of Caw, I saw some muddy riverbank behind some fallen logs and figured that was the spot. As I stepped out of my epic V9 onto the muddy bank, I slowly began to sink into the mud, and this is known as mistake number 1. Don't stand on the mud. Put a paddle into it. See what happens. Trust me, mud is not forgiving on the Missouri. Continuing. I expected that, but then I kept sinking, and soon I was up to my knees and still sinking. What the heck? So I threw my body over the bow of the V9 and slowly started pulling my legs out of the muck, one at a time, trying not to lose my booties. I mean, trying not to lose your life in the only time that children of the 80s get to try and escape quicksand seems like a good thing, but hey, let's continue. It worked, except how do I get my boat and myself off the mud and back into the river as I'm laying on the bow of my V9, a surf ski, which was dragged halfway up the muddy riverbank? The only answer that I could come up with was to backstroke it with my hands in the mud, and gradually my boat and I slid into the big muddy, slightly muddier for it. Everything below my neck was covered in thick mud, including my boat, but at least I was back on the water, paddling in a bucket full of mud, which, by the way, doesn't go down vents and openings and everything else, and that mud stinks. Veterans know this. Rookies, you're going to learn real quick. 15 minutes later, I spotted a sandbar where I spent the next 30 minutes cleaning mud off the boat and myself. And by the way, again, when you come up on a sandbar, it's going to feel different under your boat. It's going to be firm. You're going to hit it with your paddle. If your paddle hits it like it should sand, then you're fine. If it hits it and sinks, you're on mud. 7 months later, I think there's still some mud on the rudder pedals. Now I know why they call it the Big Muddy. So when you're in that situation, he did a pretty good job. He put his body over the bow, etc. But you put the paddle down into it, see what happens, because you can generally pull the paddle out, and obviously don't put it too deep. And if you're ever in a situation where a mud bank is your only good source of land, say fog or storm, then put something down on it. Anything could be that you lay your PFD down on it and you stand on the PFD. Anything that spreads your weight will allow you to stand on that mud bar. And having had to hang out on mud bars for a couple of hours during fogs, that's definitely helpful, because otherwise you're sitting in your boat not moving for 2 hours, which is not a pleasant experience. The sandbars on the 340 are a blessing. The mud is not. Make sure you know the difference as you come up to them. This is 340 Paddler, hoping that you keep your paddle in the water.